Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you to panel 2 of this symposium. And it's about rural-urban linkages in bioeconomy. So the topic of this panel is mostly on bioeconomy. And I would like to start by introducing the 3 distinguished members of the panel. And I will do that in the order of their appearance in the program. So our first speaker will be Dr. Ian Roberts, and he has been more than 25 years of experience in the food industry. And since 15 years, he has been Chief Technology Officer at Bühler, which is a family-owned Swiss company created already 1860. So that's a very old company, and which is today one of the global leaders in the development of technologies that covers people's basic need for food and mobility. Recently, Bühler also expanded its business activities into bioprocessing by establishing partnerships and new companies. And in addition to being CTO at Bühler, Ian is also co-founder and president of the startup accelerator Mass Challenge Switzerland and other platforms designed to promote entrepreneurship. I leave it to you if you want to join here the podium or if you want to watch from there. Okay, so thanks a lot. The second speaker will be Jan Grossart. He is a German science journalist, university lecturer and author. And since 2021, he has been professor of bioeconomy and circular economy at Biberach University of Applied Sciences. And his most recent book is titled Bioeconomy of Buildings, From Resource Flows to Meaning. And I look forward to this discussion on the meaning. And the third speaker is Louise Fresco. She's already here on stage. She's a Dutch scientist and author who is best known for her expertise in food, agriculture, and sustainability. She's a professor at Wageningen University and was president of the university's executive board from 2014 to 2022. She was also Deputy Director General of the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So as you might see, there's a very diverse panel here, and I'm sure we will have interesting insights and discussions. Now, I would like to start first with a few thoughts on the topic and what is bioeconomy? I try to summarize very briefly. It's the use of renewable biological resources. It produces not only food, but also materials and energy, and it aims for sustainability and innovation. Of course, inclusion is an important aspect. So the sharing of benefits, the participation of rural communities, and the opportunities for smallholders, youth, and women. And if you now look at what the rural areas versus the urban areas can contribute, of course, the rural areas are the resource base for bioeconomy. But it's more than biomass production. It's also ecosystem services, and it's stewardship and local knowledge, which is provided by the rural areas. Urban areas are then the innovation hubs where research and technology is developed, and there's a processing industry and the large markets. Now, many countries have developed bioeconomy strategies. They have committed to a Green Deal, and the bioeconomy is an important part of such Green Deal strategies. Very interesting enough, Switzerland does not have such a strategy. There is a discussion if there is a bioeconomy strategy, but until now, this has not materialized, and maybe we can come back in the discussion then to ask about the pros and cons of this approach that we have here in Switzerland. I was also asked to give a short perspective from myself, and my name is Beat Keller. I'm from the University of Zurich, where I'm professor of plant sciences. And in our research, we have really worked across scales. We have worked from molecular biology in the lab to field experiments and pre-breeding of crop plants. And the most important biological question has been to try to identify the molecular basis of disease resistance of cereals against fungal pathogens, which in modern agriculture are mostly treated with pesticides, but there is genetic resistance, and it's important to understand and use that genetic resistance. We have also worked on genomics, and one of the biggest achievements was in the frame of a very large international consortium where we completed the wheat genome sequence at high quality 7 years ago. And that has really then advanced very much the plant breeding globally. Now, if I want to summarize in one sentence what are the challenges that I see in this topic that we discussed today is the pressures humanity has been placing on the environment have put Earth stability at risk. That's for me a sort of a one-sentence summary of the problem. And I want to expand this a little bit in the next slides. They were already mentioned, the planetary boundaries, very briefly this morning. You might know this 9 planetary boundaries framework, which serves as a method to define the safe operating space for humanity. So it gives us a sort of indication where we are with our activities. Are we okay, or are we in a risk zone or in a very high risk zone? And this is a scheme of these 9 planetary boundaries, and where we are. I mean, these are calculations, models, assumptions, but that's a sort of the summary of all this work, that in only 2 or 3 planetary boundaries, we are still in a green zone, which means it's safe space. And then in the others, we are in high risk zone. And I just want to mention that the one planetary boundary that I'm most familiar with from my work, that's genetic and biological diversity. That's where the arrow is, and you can see that genetic diversity, we are definitely in a very high risk zone, and that's something where we have to improve. And colleagues of the University of Zurich have just published last year a very important paper on the devastating impact on biodiversity. So this is also work I was not involved in. But it shows how the 3 main contributors to the loss of biodiversity are agriculture, urbanization, and pollution. And this is really one of the biggest challenges we have globally to try to improve. Now, the food system contributions to these high-risk transgression of planetary boundaries are quite big. You see here again the same scheme, but now the hatched areas are the contributions by the food systems. And you can see that for several of these planetary boundaries, it's actually food systems are the most problematic contributors to transgression of the planetary boundaries. So when we talk about food systems, we are at the heart of some of the biggest global challenges that we have here. Now, some of these authors who are working on these global planetary boundaries, they also give us reason for optimism. And what they have suggested is that we need a technological, cultural U-turn to remove our activities from the high-risk zone to the acceptable risk again. And the first, on the left, you see that currently, well, that's outdated, but it is assumed that there's a population of 6.7 billion people on this planet. And if we respect all planetary boundaries, it is estimated that 3.4 billion people could have enough food. So that's basically only half of the population if we are in the safe space of the planetary boundaries. So that's quite dramatic. But then they suggest by management improvements such as irrigation, fertilizer, and cropland expansion, water, nutrient, and land management, that you could compensate or overcompensate that. And then by adding a reduction of food loss and finally diet change, less meat. I'm sure you know this, that one could feed within the safe operating space of this planet more than 10 billion people. So that's these are models, assumptions, but I think it's interesting to use such thoughts on when we discuss some of the aspects today. And to be a little bit more specific on the global food production and transgression of planetary boundaries, moving to the safe operating space for food systems requires a kind of several type of measures like reduction of greenhouse emissions, of course, halting the conversion of intact nature to agricultural land. Fertilizer inputs have to be redistributed. There's the question of limiting pesticide and antibiotic use. And all this has to be done without negatively affecting yields. So, in other words, we have to increase output with less input. And that, in other words, I think this is defined as productivity increase. So what we desperately need is a productivity increase in the food system. And I want just to address one aspect where I think historically agricultural productivity has been massively influenced by plant breeding. And I have tried to summarize here a little bit some studies which try to estimate how much plant breeding has contributed to productivity increase. And of course, productivity increase in agriculture can be by management practices, but it can also be by improved genotypes, by having seeds, which are genotypes that are better adapted to our form of agriculture. And without going into too much detail, historically, this has been 50% of the total productivity increase or more in the European Union since the year 2000. And at the global level, it's estimated to be now at 50% of the productivity increase comes from genetic gain of the seeds that are used in agriculture. And with this knowledge that plant breeders have, I was really amazed when I saw this cultural technological U-turn, which is needed, that, as you can see here on the right, the plant breeding, which is historically known to contribute 50% to productivity increase, is not even mentioned here. And this has probably to do with the fact that some of the plant breeding technologies which have come on the market in the last 20 or 30 years are highly discussed in the society, genetic modification and similar topics. But nevertheless, plant breeding has shown that it can contribute massively to this challenge that I have tried to describe to you a minute ago. So at the moment, you know that there is a lot of discussion on the use of new breeding technology, such as gene editing in plant breeding, and that will certainly, if the regulatory boundaries are positive for the technology, will be able to contribute to the productivity increase. Plant breeding, classical plant breeding, has been very successful in the past, and here come new tools which can further improve the productivity. I think this is really the aspect that I wanted to bring in, that we should not forget the role of plant breeding when we discuss the agricultural transitions that are needed in the future. And of course, this is only a very small aspect of bioeconomy. And I would like now to hand over to our speakers. And I would like to ask Ian Roberts to give his input.